How do you create something truly alien? In 1965, that was the chief question in Stanley Kubrick's mind for his next project, 2001: A Space Odyssey. In the finished film, all we see is the monolith, the Stargate, and the floating star child. But before all of that, Kubrick tested loads of different alien designs, worked with dozens of artists, and even consulted Carl Sagan. Looking back at the finished project, the final result seems perfect, but at the time, it was quite a rocky journey to get there. Kubrick's last film, Dr. Strangelove, had been a smash hit that earned him the rare ability to do whatever he wanted. And so for his next project, Kubrick turned his sights to space. Science fiction had been a popular genre in the 50s, but it was a very specific kind of space. It was cheap, schlocky, with bug-eyed monsters and tin robots. In the eyes of the general public, science fiction was considered lowbrow, a kids genre. This is the man that directed Spartacus, Paths of Glory. What would make him turn his sights to science fiction? Kubrick became fascinated with the idea of life outside our planet as a legitimate question for science to ask and study, and one that wasn't being fully explored by cinema at the time. Science fiction legend Arthur C. Clarke explained that back then, science fiction films have always meant monsters and sex. But could they address the question, are we alone? Kubrick brought Clarke on board to work on a screenplay using Clarke's short story The Sentinel as a basis. He wanted to explore mankind's place in the future, realistic space travel, and of course, aliens. So in 1965, Kubrick issued a press release for his next project, Journey Beyond the Stars. In this early version of the script, Bowman, after emerging from the Stargate, floats over a city and encounters a variety of lifelike things. Inhabitants that move with a smooth, flowing motion that makes Earthlings seem jumpy and awkward by comparison. It's easy to write something like that, but how do you actually do it? Filming began in 1965 without a clear answer. They knew what they didn't want. Most on-screen aliens up to that point followed a similar trend. It was actors in rubber suits, large heads with big bug eyes. Kubrick's goal was to create something that didn't look like a human came up with it. But even though they'd started filming at the end of 1965, by September 1967, they were still trying to figure out what the aliens should look like. They tried these clay sculptures that kinda look like gargoyles. Then, instead of trying to create something physical, they went analog and tried to create shapes using the feedback from the television. But it was really hard to get them to move right. There's even drawings for this tall, skinny one that looks very similar to the ones out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But the weirdest attempt was this polka dot man. They covered an actor with polka dots and filmed him against a light backdrop. The idea was that by using high contrast film, only the black dots would be visible, and if inverted, it would give the impression of an alien made up of dots of light. The result was looking at a person decked out in polka dots. They were all attempts to use technology to create something no one had seen before. But after months of testing, designing, experimenting, and with the film almost finished, Kubrick was no further along. He said, "We all discussed means of photographically depicting an extraterrestrial creature in a manner that would be as mind-boggling as the being itself, and it soon became apparent that you cannot imagine the unimaginable." So with production nearly over and with no alien design, how did they solve the problem? Well, one account says the answer came from a conversation with astronomer Carl Sagan. Another that Kubrick came to it after realizing there was just no other way. Regardless, in the end, they decided not to show any aliens. They simply imply their existence through things like the monolith. And that ends up being part of the genius of the film. It creates a feeling of something far more alien than anything they could have shown on screen, because it's the unknown that's scary. You can get used to this, but who knows what could be behind the monolith. What I really loved about reading about this is that it shows that even for Stanley Kubrick, arguably the greatest director of all time, that the creative process was still just one of discovery. He didn't have all the answers, he didn't fully know what he wanted, and the best result came after months and months of trying and failing to create something else.